And first thing the guy on the boat says is, if you're gonna puke, go to the back of the boat. I know it's a different name for a boat, but whatever it was, that's what he meant. Do not go into the cabin. Go to the back. This is a 3-hour trip. That's how long we're gonna be out. No matter what happens to you, we're gonna be out 3 hours. Well, 15 minutes after we left, there were 3 people hanging off the back of the boat. And my son and I were on the side in position to sharkfish. So we are there in front of the poles, and we get to where we're fishing, and we start fishing, and the boat is just like this. Now he's 10 years old, and I put my hand out to hold him. And every time it went down, we saw the water, and when it up, we saw the sky. But we were fishing for sharks. No one was catching sharks, but we were fishing for sharks. And about an hour into it, the guy sitting next to him, the screen started reeling fast. The pole is bent, and we're just thinking, now's our time. The fish are gonna bite, we're gonna get a shark. All of a sudden, the guy behind us on the other side of the boat screams, same thing. He's reeling as hard as he can, and he's screaming that he's got a big one. Turns out, they're both going down at opposite times. And this went over and over again with everybody around them, so excited they couldn't stand it until my guy won. And they pulled up the other guy's line. And the boat, they just crossed in, and we're at 2 hours into a 3-hour trip, and the only thing that's happened is the 2 people have gone back and forth trying to reel each other's line in. The captain looks up, there's lightning, and it looks closer. There's thunder we can hear, and he said, we've passed the 2-hour mark in our 3-hour trip. We're done. We're going in. If you want to, you can go sit in the cabin where all the sick people are. Or you can go out on the bow of the boat and sit in the front, and you'll be fine. Hold on. And so my 10-year-old son and I walked by ourselves to the front of the boat, got in, held on to the lines in front, and every time the boat went down, spray went over us. We got all the way back. He was totally soaked. I was totally soaked. We saw my daughter and my wife standing and frowning on the dock. First thing he did is run up to them, pull his shirt out, and go, Mom, taste my shirt. And it did taste just like salt water. And that was a fabulous trip, regardless of how poorly I timed the whole thing.
That was wonderful. I was kind of worried about what the shirt would taste like. How naive to think that no one would be drunk that early in the morning. Thank you so much. Another one, another folded one. I love it when they fold them. I don't know who they think they fold them. Ah, another folded one. I know this is going to be a good story because it's Jennifer Clee. Come on.
I had a story all ready to go tonight, and then I told my husband, Danny, what the theme was. And he said that I had to tell you about the time that I was late to school. Not as a student, as a teacher. Now, just a little context. I am a perfectionist in the most obnoxious type A way possible. I'm a total goody two-shoes and rule follower. I annoy myself. And even as a child, the oldest child, I really prided myself on being the responsible one. And as a teacher at Bishop Chittard, I had never, in 10 years, I never missed a day of school. I just did not allow myself to be sick. But everyone has to have a vice, and mine is, and always has been, sleep. Deep sleep. Like I harbor this secret belief that given the opportunity, I could hibernate. So, being the responsible employee that I was, I always, any school night, I would set 3 alarms that would go off at 3 different times to make sure that I would get up for school. And the night in question, the night before the incident, we'll call it, started out like any other. I came home from school, I ate dinner, did some grading, and I was in bed by 10 so that I could get my 8 hours. And at this point in the story, Danny insisted that I share with you that at the time, I lived in a studio apartment in the heart of Broad Ripple, right next to the Vogue. Did I ever go to the Vogue? No. Did I ever go out in Broad Ripple? Not at night. Have I ever been drunk in my entire life? Absolutely not. Broad Ripple was wasted on me. And I share this because what happens next it seems like it can only be explained by alcohol or drugs. And I don't think I need to tell you that I've never even smoked a cigarette. I woke up wondering 3 things. 1, why is my apartment so bright? 2, why are all 3 of my alarms going off at the same time? And 3, who is banging on my door? And at this point in the story, Danny said that I should introduce you to Coach Vince Lorenzano. Vince Lorenzano was the renowned head football coach at Bishop Chatard High School. He is one of the winningest football coaches in Indiana high school history. And he, at the time, was also this no-nonsense dean of students, the largest and strongest man on staff. And that is why after the school called me 8 times with no answer and my phone was on, they sent Vince Lorenzano to my studio apartment next to the Vogue, assuming that he would find me dead or chained to my radiator or maybe both. I was still in a daze when I opened the door, and I see Coach Lorenzano, and he starts to blush. And I realize I am in my pajamas. And he just looks away and says, "You okay?" I don't think I appreciated the phrase walk of shame until that late morning, early afternoon when I finally got to school, just in time for our weekly all-school mass, and had to walk across the gymnasium in front of the entire student body, where word had spread that I had likely been killed, because it was more likely that I would have been killed than simply overslept. And a small part of me wished I had been killed. But I somehow survived the rest of the day, and on the way home, bought myself a new alarm clock. And while Vince and I were much closer after that morning, we never spoke of it again.
Bless your heart. That's hilarious. And how long have you been teaching there? Oh, all right. It could happen to anyone. Well, that was hilarious. Now, I know some of you got another story out there. I know that back table, I can see your brains just churn. But I'm going to reach in here and get another folded piece of paper. When will they learn? But right now, we're going to hear a story about time from Chat Flat.
I did not hold that.
It's fun.
That came from it after it left my hands. The story I'm not telling tonight checks most of the boxes. True story, check. First person, mostly. But it's about 6 times too long, so I'll just have to find some other outlet for that one, which I was starting to feel was just about ready for, except for maybe the scariest unfinished part. It's the kind of story that's probably best to run by the other person who is in it. And after such a stretch of time, not just since it all happened, but since we've even been in touch, that's a really easy step to procrastinate about. You search up some likely contact info and reach for the phone or start an email, and darned if you don't see a couple things in that story, it wouldn't be hurt by another couple drafts or some last minute detail checking. And that has been the story of the story for like 15 years since I put the first words down, which followed 20 years I carried it just in my head, always thinking, it'd be a pretty good story someday if I can just keep those memories faithfully enough. So when I finally sent that email, it was kind of a big deal. And then after all of that buildup, it's not up to me. Will that address I found even be good? Will reading a story from me out of the blue be of any interest? Will I even get a reply? So I stood up and breathed and put a bowl of soup in the microwave and gave myself a little talk about patience and letting go. And what happens, happens. And what happened was the phone rang before the soup was hot and led to kind of a funny short conversation, because in my focus on patience and letting go, I had given very little thought to what to say if a voice I hadn't heard in 34 years was suddenly there on the phone. And that led to some getting reacquainted small talk, and at last to the point, may I ask for your thoughts on this story? I probably missed a few things. Please tell me I didn't butcher it. Well, sir, I butchered it. And she's very generous about that. It's like, well, it's a pretty good story. It may be just a different one. But after all of those years, so convinced I had that indelibly etched in my brain, could only be a little fuzzy around the edges, I felt real chagrin. And my memory, as it turns out, is not what sucked. My listening sucked, because that story in the first person part sets up a couple of mysteries that last until a later denouement where she told me some things I had not known at those times. And that's why it's first person mostly, and why it's always had the shape of a story to it without any clever shaping from me. But that conversation, it turns out, was the kind that just rolls along start to finish with neither person noticing they're not on the same page. She told me 2 stories that night, one for each mystery, but I had somehow shown up expecting there would be one that explained both, and that's what I managed to hear. And from that time, through years of carrying it in my head, 15 years of revising drafts, I've been laboring to make details fit together that came from 2 stories to begin with. And once it was written drafts, those were things I noticed and made plans to recheck and pin down, but that whole time it was more like an oral history I just kept retelling to myself. It did what oral histories do. It just got a little tidier every time, and I didn't notice. And I still haven't figured out how to rework that story. I used to think I knew what it was about. Time and listening and workings of memory were not what I would have said. Well, taking that one step to check sure opened my eyes about that.
I'm gonna need to talk to this woman. Thank you, Chad. Listen, in case you guys don't know, we are going to meet again in January 17th at Center Point Brewing Company. I don't remember where that is.
Circle City Industrial Complex.
Oh yeah, Circle City Industrial Complex, not quite. Right? They don't have food, but you can bring food or order it. I promise to bring my chicken cheese ball, okay? And we can share it, all right? The theme is fireworks. Listen, I know you're thinking of some other stories. So as you listen to our next teller, don't be shy. Come on up to see Samantha. She'll give you some paper and a pencil. You can fold it up like the rest of the people. And don't tell them. And you can come on up and tell a story too. Like Nancy Fitzgerald, was that what I'm reading? And what's your last name? Say that again. Belvedere. Belvedere. Nice to meet you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nancy, and I am a runner. And I don't know about you, but when I run, it's not necessarily what I enjoy very much. What I do enjoy is the feeling that I get and afterwards when you're all done, the days that you put in 3 or 4 miles, that just gives me a sense of confidence. Now, if you know anything about running, you're going to know that time is not our friend. We are always trying to beat our own personal record and get a PR. So basically, we're competing against ourselves. Now, not that I mind competition. I grew up in a really competitive family. I'm the youngest of 4. I have an older brother, Denny, and we have a really close relationship, but we competed with each other all the time. When we were younger, we had a ping pong table in our basement. And ping pong is not necessarily a sport that you think of raising the heart rate. But man, our battles were epic. We would dash from one side of the room together, trying to get that perfect shot in. I mean, sweat would be dripping off our faces. We got into it so much. I occasionally won, and when I did, I was known to dance around the house singing Rocky theme song in my head. Now, when our competitiveness level carried even into adulthood, we both ended up in Indianapolis, and we would go out to dinner. And it became a tradition that after the dinner was over, we would race to the car to see who would get there first. Now, Denny is older and taller, and unfortunately faster, so he would get there first, but he would turn around and look at me behind him, come back, and run circles around me. Saying he was running circles around me the entire time. Like I said, he was a loving brother. When I moved to Indianapolis, I did hear about the race called the Indianapolis Mini Marathon. I decided I was going to do that. That was going to be on my bucket list. And I signed up for a couple years, but I never trained. And I was just too embarrassed to even pick up the t-shirt. And then one year I started dating somebody who was also racing. And he said, "Nancy, just do a race. Just walk whatever you can run." I thought, all right, I'm going to give that a try. So I did it. I finished my first half marathon in 3 hours and 15 minutes, and I was excited. This was something I wanted to continue to do. But I wanted to finish that race running. I tried for several years to do that, and every time I hit like mile 10, and those negative thoughts would get in your head, and you'd be like, ugh, can I make it? Can I make it? And I'd stop and I'd walk. It was just very frustrating. Well, in 2003, I decided this was going to be the year. I committed to doing this. I had married the man who had suggested that I walk part of the race. We had 2 small kids at that time. He would leave for work at 6 a.m., so I would give up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get my mileage in. I was dedicated and determined this was going to be the year. The day of the race, I woke up, I was really nervous. I didn't sleep the night before. I didn't eat breakfast. I was just praying that I would not throw up at the starting line. And then I feel this tap on my shoulder. I turn around, and it was Denny. He had decided to run the race too. All my confidence level just plummeted. But I didn't have time to think about it because the gun went off and we took off. Denny was way ahead of me. Mile 1, he turns around, he sees me behind him, he runs back, and he does his little circle dance around me. He was a loving brother. I tried to not let that get me. I pushed forward. I started counting off the miles. Mile 8, mile 9. I hit mile 10, and I was feeling pretty good. I was thinking, okay, this is going to be it. As I approached mile 11, I started to get worried because at 12, I knew there was a hill coming up. And I was like, I just don't know if I can do this. I started thinking about walking again and if I could make those final 2 miles. And I looked up ahead and I saw somebody familiar, and it was Denny. And he was walking. I don't know if any of you have an older brother, but all the motivation I needed was right there in that moment. I dug deep. I got my resources pumping. I started running faster and faster and faster and faster until I lovingly tapped him on the shoulder and said, see you at the finish line. The Rocky theme song was playing in my head as I crossed that line. I finished that race without running, without walking, in 2 hours and 3 minutes, and I beat my brother. It was the best time of my life.
That was great. I love it. Anybody's got a brother, I'm telling you. Now listen, I can see somebody's gears just churning. There's another story out there somewhere now. There's still time for you to sign up. I'm not going anywhere. But right now, I got a story by Samantha Powers.
So I was raised by an avid baseball fan. My dad has been a fan of the Chicago White Sox for many, many decades. I believe my first game, I was under 1 year old, and within the first inning, there were 4 home runs that left me in tears, and we had to leave. So I've been going to games for a long time, and in the summer of 1996, there was one game in particular. Now, we were fortunate enough to have some really good friends who had 2 rows of seats right behind the visitors' dugout. Now, like I said, I've been to a lot of games before. I had eaten some really good soft pretzels in those seats, taken some amazing naps in those seats, and had some of those Juilliard audition-worthy tantrums in those seats. So again, I wasn't new to the ballpark, but for some reason this game was special because we were going to be going with not only me and my parents, but our friends from down the street in the neighborhood. They had 4 kids, then it was me, their 2 parents, and my 2 parents. It was a normal game. I couldn't tell you what we ate. I couldn't tell you if the Sox won. However, we all had a really good time. I just remember the sun shining down with lots of laughs, lots of cheering, and just an all-around good time that left us sleeping the whole way home. Now, unfortunately, 2 weeks after that, my mom had passed away to breast cancer. So, and it was a pretty rough time, as one can imagine. I was 6, going on to 7, had just started first grade. And I remember walking in on the first day of first grade, and my teacher, Mrs. Stavko, who I still am in touch with today, she got on my level just as any good teacher should, and she said, "We're gonna have a good year. I know you're having a hard time, and I'm here for whatever you need, but we're gonna have a good year, and just know that we care about you." And as a first grader who doesn't really understand her new normal, that meant a lot because a lot of confusing things had been going on. And it was nice to know that at school I would have that stability, I would have that comfort, and I would have that support. So months pass, time passes, and before we know it, it is the first day of the MLB season. Just as every year it comes. And I was in my first grade classroom with one of the girls who had gone to the game with us, and her mother comes running into our classroom in the middle of the day. Now, as a first grader who had just experienced quite a lot of trauma, having your neighbor run into your classroom in the middle of school is a little confusing and a little scary. but she had a really happy look on her face. And she said, Jackie, Sam, come here, I gotta tell you something. I said, yeah, what? She said, your dad just called me and he has a friend who's at the Sox game, and you'll never guess what, they handed out magnets as the giveaway. And that was nothing special. I mean, okay, cool giveaway on the first day of the game. And she said, no, it's a calendar magnet, has all the home games on it. Again, not impressed. Keep going. And she said, but guess what? The main picture is us from that game back in July of 1996. So we eventually get one of these magnets that they handed out to thousands of people. And the sole picture on the front is the 2 rows of seats that we were in, my friends and I holding up signs that say Go Sox. And just between the shoulder of my friend and I, you can see my mom. So that was kind of my way as a first grader going through a really difficult time to see that while times can be tough, time also goes on, and there's always going to be another MLB opening day.
That was just wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. I used to go to those games. My mother had a good time harassing my auntie, who was a Cubs fan. And she would talk about those Cubs and they're going to win. I don't know why you keep rooting for them. And they were both in heaven when they won the last World Series. And I think about them all the time. But I would take a book with me to the ballpark. I was only there for the treats. I know somebody out there is thinking about another story that they want to tell. And we got plenty of time. But right now, our teller is Stephanie Edwards. Everybody has all these nice, inspiring stories, and mine is crap, I think. But I just thought I would tell you, I have a thing about time. I am my adult ADD comes out because I will be, oh, my office is a mess. I can't find anything. I keep shoving things in there because people are coming to the house. So I shove stuff in the office to get it out of the floor. And then I realized I can't find my computer. I can't find my calendar. Well, I try to go back in there and look for stuff. But meanwhile, I was supposed to be cleaning up the kitchen. I was supposed to be washing dishes. Well, I'll rinse this glass, but I need to go back and, oh, there are clothes on the floor. I thought I was supposed, that's right, I gotta wash these kids' clothes because my grandkids came over and left their dirty clothes. But I want to get back to them because they need their uniforms. So I'll go downstairs to wash those uniforms, and then I realize, oh, I need to refill the laundry detergent thing, so that's why it just kicks in. I can't get anything completely done because I'm busy doing 27 other things. And then I also have a tendency to, my daughter and I talk, and she's as bad at procrastinating things as I am. And then we have an hour conversation on the phone. It doesn't dawn on me I could be doing something while I was on the phone, but instead I sit down and the dog snuggles up to me and we're both really comfortable, so nothing really gets done. So I just come to the knowledge that I walk into a room, can't remember what I went in there for, so I turn around and walk back out and think, oh, it'll come to me in a few minutes. But by then I've done something else. So I don't know, time is not on my side sometimes, but I thank God that I have time, because otherwise you guys would be in my memorial service. Anybody else over there got a story to tell? Samantha's right here. She promises not to fold this one up, so I'll pull it first. Time is not my friend. my parents would get up at an ungodly hour in the morning, always, and wake up the whole family. Think you were supposed to be up with them, even though we didn't have to go to school for 2 more hours. My mother used to work at night at R. Donaldson Sons in Chicago. They made yellow pages, okay? And I think encyclopedias. At any rate, my mother wouldn't get home until it was time for us to start walking to school. So my father would get up in the morning, and he was in construction, and he would fix breakfast. He would fry the entire pound of bacon, an entire pound of sausage. He'd make grits, he'd make eggs, and he loved fried eggs. So by the time you went in a pan of biscuits, so by the time you went into the kitchen, when you woke up, the grease was congealed over the eggs. And there's nothing like eating cold grits, I'm here to tell you. And this was before microwaves had been invented, okay? So you couldn't stick it in the microwave and warm it up. So we sort of look at it and discuss and think about, well, we'll just wait for lunch. But I remember one day, my mother arrived just as we were walking. My brother John and I were old enough to go to school. My youngest brother Keith, he would go to Mrs. Crawford's house. Mrs. Crawford lived 2 doors away, and she would take care of him. And she would always fix him pancakes. So since he couldn't go to school, and he was mad that he couldn't go to school, he would say, I'm going to eat some pancakes. I'm going to eat. And he would not stop eating pancakes that were the size of a plate until he had eaten about 14. So I'll never forget one morning, I don't know what happened, but as I started to walk to school with the rest of the neighborhood kids, somebody noticed that my hair had not been combed. I was shocked, shamed, and chagrined. I had to run to Mrs. Crawford's house so she could quickly do my hair so that I could go on to school. I had run out of time, and from then on, my father cooked a lot of food. His favorite dish was salmon patties, but he did not do hair, and I remember that from way back when, back in the day, a long time ago. Listen, is there anybody out there that has another story to tell? We got plenty of time. My drink is still halfway full. I'm not going nowhere. Listen. Ooh, almost knocked my drink over. That meant I would have had to buy another whole drink. Now, I want you to know that there are some yellow slips out somewhere, or they're coming out. And the reason we have these yellow slips is so that you might win complimentary tickets to another event. How many of you were there to hear a Christmas carol? It was fantastic. It was a very good show. So if you fill out those surveys, you too might win tickets to an upcoming performance. I don't have any more lies to tell you right now. Anybody? We're going to have a drawing before the night is over. I'm trying to think about time. There's a song about time. Can anybody sing it? Time after time. Sing it off. I heard that. Yes, it is.
Chambers Brothers had a great one, but it's impossible to sing. Chambers Brothers, probably nobody remembers.
I know the Chambers Brothers.
It is.
Well, okay. If you don't have any more things to add, then I'm going to be forced to give out some prizes. Some of these are first, some of these are second, some of these are third. I see that our third place winner is I'm trying to see if there's a tie. It's Nancy.
No, so ignore those.
No, that's what I said. Nancy. You marked it. I got it. You know, us librarians, you can't give us too much information. Third place is Nancy, congratulations. And we are going to take pictures. Second place is Samantha. She pulled our heartstrings. And our first place winner is Jennifer Lee. Congratulations. Now, our next one in January, our topic is fireworks. I could tell you about how my brothers used to throw fireworks at me in the house when my mother was gone, but I'm gonna save it to our next gathering. We're gonna collect all those yellow slips so we can have a drawing. And I'm gonna take another sip of wine. Again, we'd like to thank Storytelling Arts of Indiana, Freetown Village, and Maestro Organizing, because people need help. Especially this people right here. I'm willing. Now, can my house get clean between now and the first of the year? I just want my garage, really. Is that a yes? He's nodding his head up and down. He's not talking to me. Well, the problem is I have to commit. Okay,